I'm telling you this the way it happened, the way it still replays in my head at night when the city finally goes quiet and nothing is left between me and my memory except the sound of my own breathing. If you were here beside me, curled up on the couch with your legs tucked under you, you would probably stop me every few minutes to ask why I didn't see the signs sooner, or why I didn't run the moment I felt the shift. I wish I could say I had an answer that made me sound wise or brave. I don't. This whole story starts with something small, the kind of moment you ignore because your life is already built on a dozen other ignored moments. My name is Claire. If you had met me a year ago, you would have said I was the kind of woman who had her life perfectly arranged. People told me that all the time, usually with a tone that carried equal parts admiration and envy. I had a stable job at a mid-sized design firm, a marriage that looked good from the outside, and a nice apartment overlooking a quiet street lined with sycamores. I smiled in photos, remembered birthdays, sent thank you cards, planned dinner parties where the candles matched the napkins. I was the friend who never made a scene. And I was bored. Not in the dramatic, restless way books describe. It was quieter. Like walking into a room and realizing the wallpaper had been peeling for months. My husband, Daniel, didn't notice. Or he pretended not to. I don't know which is worse. On our 5-year anniversary, we sat across from each other in a restaurant he had chosen without asking what I wanted. He commented on the wine like he was reading from a script. I wore a dress he used to love. He didn't look at it once. Halfway through the meal, he excused himself to take a call, of course it was important, and I watched the candle between us flicker as if even the flame was uncomfortable with the silence. Later that night, when we got home, he kissed my forehead, said he was exhausted, and fell asleep with his back to me. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly I had stopped reaching for him. Around that time, work became heavier. Clients were restless, timelines impossible. Promotions dangled like bait with hooks hidden underneath. I stayed late, partly because I had to, partly because walking into the apartment early only meant more silence. It was during this restless, undefined phase of my life that the hotel project landed on my desk. The Meridian Grand. The email from our director described it as a flagship renovation, an historic seaside hotel being reborn as a Havana-inspired luxury property with a Cuban jazz lounge, neon-lit bar, and rooftop terrace. They wanted a designer with emotional intelligence and atmosphere sensitivity, which was his way of saying they wanted someone who understood feelings better than fiscal sheets. That was me. I went to the first walkthrough alone on a gray Tuesday morning. The building loomed tall and tired against the sky, the old sign rusted, the windows clouded from years of neglect. Inside, dust lay thick on the broken tiles, and the air smelled like old linens and forgotten seasons. And still, something pulsed beneath it. A story waiting to be unearthed. I felt it immediately, that elector come of possibility. The hotel manager who greeted me was a tall, elegant woman named Evelyn Hart. Sharp eyes, smoother words. She walked me through the skeleton of the future lounge, gesturing with long fingers as she described the warm neon, the smoky lights, the dark teal walls they wanted, the music that would seep out from the stage at night. She said guests should feel like they were stepping into a humid Havana night even if it was raining outside. When she spoke about the music lounge, her tone shifted, softened, warmed. That's how I knew it wasn't just another room to her. It was the heartbeat of the hotel. Then she introduced me to him. His name was Adrian Lowe. He was standing near the old stage platform, sleeves rolled up, hands dusty from examining the warped wood planks. He turned when he heard my name, and I swear something inside me jolted, like I had been running half asleep and suddenly hit cold water. He had one of those faces you don't forget. Clean lines, faint stubble, dark hair in a loose wave. But it wasn't the kind of striking beauty that makes you suspicious. His eyes were the trap, warm gray, studying people like they were pages he wanted to read carefully. He extended his hand, smiled a little, and said he'd been waiting to meet me because he'd seen my portfolio and liked the way I used light. And that was the first crack. It sounds ridiculous, right? Being undone by a compliment about lighting design. But it wasn't the words. It was the way he said them, like he had seen something in my work that most people, including Daniel, had never bothered to look for. I told myself he was just being polite. And I believed that for about 10 minutes. Until he started walking alongside me, pointing out structural quirks, the ways he planned to restore the original curved ceiling, the things the old hotel had tried to hide under cheap renovations. Our conversation slipped into something comfortable too easily, like we were picking up a thread we had dropped years ago. He asked real questions, not the polite surface ones people ask because silence scares them. And when I answered, he listened. Not with that distracted nod Daniel had perfected, but with actual curiosity. As we walked deeper into the lounge, the dusty windows filtered faint afternoon light in streaks that landed across his face. He looked at the room like he could see its future already, not just the work it would take to get there. I admired that. Maybe too much. We spent nearly 3 hours assessing the space. When I finally left, my notebook was full, my mind buzzing, and my stomach tight with an emotion I refused to name. That evening, I walked into my apartment and found Daniel on the couch eating takeout and watching the news. He didn't look up right away when I came in. When he did, he asked if the meeting went fine, already reaching for the remote as if the answer didn't matter. I said yes. And then, because something in me wanted him to notice me for once, I added that I'd met the project lead. That he was incredibly sharp, that this renovation might be the best thing I'd worked on in years. Daniel said that's great, without turning from the television. The second crack. The weeks that followed felt like a blur of construction noise, sketches, late nights, and text messages from Evelyn reminding me of deadlines. The project became my world. Or maybe I let it become my world because it was easier than confronting the blank space in my marriage. Every time I walked into the hotel, I saw more of the future peeking through the shell of the past. New lighting rigs. Fresh paint. Custom fixtures arriving in crates. The entire place smelled like sawdust and anticipation. And Adrian was there. Always there. Some days he was covered in dust, sleeves pushed up, hair messy from running his hands through it while studying blueprints. Some days he wore crisp shirts that made him look like someone who belonged in a glossy magazine. He moved through the space with purpose, with confidence, with this quiet intensity that pulled my gaze whether I wanted it to or not. We never flirted. Not openly. Not deliberately. But there was something underneath our conversations, a low hum of awareness that neither of us acknowledged. We would talk about work, tile sizing, acoustic panels, seating layout, and yet there was always a point when our eyes held for a second too long. When one of us stood a little too close. When one of us leaned toward the other without meaning to. Or maybe we meant to. I started dressing better for site days. I told myself it was because Evelyn was always impeccably dressed and I didn't want to look sloppy next to her. That was a lie. I caught myself checking my hair in the dusty bathroom mirror before stepping into the lounge. I told myself I was being ridiculous. That this was just project chemistry, the kind of natural alignment that happens sometimes between professionals working intensely together. But every time Adrian smiled at something I said, something in me warmed in a way I had not felt in years. The turning point, the moment I should have run, came 3 weeks into the project. A storm hit the city in the late afternoon, the kind that turns the sky into bruised clouds and sends the sea crashing hard against the shore. The power flickered twice in the hotel, the old wiring groaning under the pressure. By the time the contractors cleared out, the rain was coming down in sheets so heavy you could barely see the street. Evelyn left early, muttering about a dinner reservation she refused to miss. Adrian stayed behind to check the moisture levels near the south wall that always leaked when the weather turned ugly. I stayed because I needed measurements for the custom bar shelving, and I didn't want to delay the order. The storm made the half-finished lounge feel surreal, dark and echoing, lit only by the emergency track lights and the glow from the neon vending machine in the corner. The sound of rain hammered the windows. The air smelled like wet wood and metal. We worked in silence for a while, both of us scribbling notes, shifting ladders, muttering to ourselves. Then thunder cracked so loud it rattled the scaffolding and made me jump, The tape measure slipped from my hand, clattering onto the dusty tiles. I muttered something to myself as I bent to pick it up. When I stood up, he was right there. Close. Too close. I froze. Not dramatically, just that subtle, instinctive stillness your body goes into when something unexpected happens. He was watching me, his expression unreadable, a faint furrow between his brows like he was thinking too many things at once. For the first time since meeting him, I felt genuinely nervous. Not because he was intimidating. Because I suddenly didn't trust myself at all. He asked if I was okay, his voice softer than usual. That soft tone, God, that was the moment everything tipped. I said I was fine even though my pulse was too loud in my ears. He nodded once, slowly, like he didn't believe me but wasn't going to push. Then he brushed dust from the sleeve of his shirt, and for some reason that small gesture made me aware of how close we were standing. How the storm outside seemed to cocoon us in this small, dim world that belonged only to us. I stepped back. He noticed. And something in his expression shifted, barely, faintly, but enough that my stomach flipped. A flicker of disappointment? Restraint? I couldn't tell. We finished our work in silence. When it was time to leave, the rain had eased, though the streets still glistened like spilled mercury. He offered me a ride. I said no. He asked if I was sure. I lied and said yes. We walked out of the hotel together anyway, toward our separate cars. The air was cold, the sky still faintly rumbling. When he reached his car, he paused, hand on the door, then turned back toward me. And he smiled. Not the polite, professional smile. Something real. Something warm. Something that said he noticed everything I hadn't said out loud. I sat in my car afterward, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing like I had sprinted. That was the first moment I admitted to myself, silently, privately, that there was something between us. And I hated myself for how much I wanted it. The affair didn't start that night. But that was the night I began to fall. The rest happened slowly, in pieces, in moments I didn't recognize as danger until it was far too late. The next week, I walked into the lounge and found a cup of coffee waiting for me on a crate beside the blueprints. The lid had my name written on it, and underneath it, in smaller letters, for the long day ahead. My stomach twisted. I looked around. He was on a ladder, adjusting wiring. He didn't look at me, but the corner of his mouth lifted when he saw me pick up the cup. Another day, he brought me a set of antique brass light pull handles he had found in a salvage shop and said he thought they would fit the aesthetic I was aiming for. I ran my thumb over the patina and felt heat crawl up my neck. One afternoon, we argued about the stage layout, passionately, both stubborn, neither willing to back down. He accused me of caring more about appearance than functionality. I accused him of prioritizing technical perfection over magic. We stood inches apart, both of us breathless, the air crackling between us like a wire pulled too tight. Then he laughed. And suddenly I did too. The tension dissolved into something warm and dangerous. These were the things that destroyed me slowly. Not kisses. Not touches. Attention. Care. Seeing and being seen. Things I had not felt from Daniel in years. The first real break in my marriage came quietly. One night, after a long day at the hotel, I came home early enough that Daniel was still awake. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone, the room lit only by the bedside lamp. I walked in, exhausted, smelling of sawdust and old plaster. He looked up at me for a second, 1 second, and then looked back at his phone. No smile. No welcome home. No question about my day. Just a glance and nothing else. I sat beside him, close enough that our knees touched. He didn't move. I asked if everything was okay. He said of course. I asked if we could spend some time together over the weekend, maybe dinner, maybe a walk down by the pier. He said he was busy. He didn't look up when he said it. I heard the lie in his voice immediately. But I didn't ask. Instead, I nodded like it didn't matter. He kissed my cheek before going to sleep. His lips were cold. When he turned away from me again, just like on our anniversary, something inside me went very still. The kind of stillness that comes right before a storm destroys a coastline. I woke up the next morning and didn't try to reach for him. And he didn't notice. The next big fracture came from Evelyn. She caught me in the hallway one afternoon and asked how things were progressing. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Adrian speaks very highly of you." Just that. Just a simple sentence. But her tone was wrong. It wasn't suspicion. It wasn't jealousy. It was knowing. It was aware. My throat went tight. I forced a smile, said something bland, and changed the subject. But in my chest, panic bloomed like a bruise. I started wondering how obvious I had been. Had I looked at him too long? Stood too close? Laughed too freely? Had everyone seen it except me? When I walked back into the lounge later that day and found him at the bar discussing fixtures with a supplier, our eyes met across the half-finished room. The moment stretched. Someone clearing their throat broke it. I looked away first. I should have stepped back then. I should have built walls. Instead, I did the opposite. That night I walked into my apartment and Daniel was already gone, another late meeting, another client emergency. There was a note on the counter saying he'd eaten early. I stared at that note for a long time. Then I walked into the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, and whispered the thing I had been avoiding. "I'm lonely." The truth of it hurt more than any lie. My phone buzzed then. A message from Adrian. "Tomorrow the chandeliers arrive. I know you wanted to see them in daylight. Come early? I'll meet you there." Nothing improper. Nothing flirtatious. But my pulse jumped anyway. I typed sure. And that was the beginning of the end. I went early the next morning, long before the contractors arrived, long before anyone else would be walking through the half-finished lobby with coffee cups and clipped conversations. The sky was still pale, washed in the kind of soft dawn light that makes everything seem cleaner than it really is. For a moment, as I approached the hotel, I wondered what I would say to him, what I would do with the tension that had been spiraling between us like a wire pulled too tight. But when I stepped through the front doors and into the quiet lobby, all those carefully rehearsed thoughts vanished. The building felt different at that hour, empty, expectant, almost tender. And there he was, standing beneath the crates of lights with a small knife in his hand, cutting open the packing straps. He looked up at the sound of my footsteps, and the way his face changed, the soft lift at the edge of his mouth, the warmth flickering in his eyes, hit me harder than I expected. He greeted me like he was relieved I came. Like my presence meant something beyond work. That was the moment I knew I was in trouble. He pulled the canvas back from the first chandelier, and the breath caught in my throat. It was gorgeous, Art Deco inspired, brass and smoked glass, shaped like a cascade of warm diamonds frozen mid-fall. The kind of lighting that changes an entire room simply by existing inside it. He watched my reaction with that faint, knowing smile. "I knew you'd like this one," he said softly. I asked how he knew, even though I already had a guess. He said he'd seen the way I touched materials. How I lingered on warm tones, how I hesitated on anything too sterile. How he'd seen me run my hand along a distressed brass column weeks ago, as if I were reading secrets through the texture. I felt my face flush. I turned away, pretending to examine the fixture more closely. But he stepped closer, and suddenly there was nowhere to hide. "You notice everything," I said, trying to sound teasing. "Only when it's worth noticing," he murmured. My pulse skittered. There are moments in life when you can feel the ground tilting, when one wrong step will lead you down a path you cannot return from. That morning was one of those moments. Standing in the quiet of the unfinished lounge, with golden light catching in dust particles around us, I knew something was shifting. Something dangerous. Something inevitable. But instead of stepping back, I stayed exactly where I was. Our work moved quickly that morning. We lifted, measured, adjusted. He watched my hands as I drew placement lines with chalk. I watched the way his shoulders rolled beneath his shirt when he raised the fixtures, muscle pulling and releasing with effortless precision. It was intimacy disguised as professionalism. By the time the contractors arrived and flooded the room with noise, I felt like I was floating. Not in the light, carefree way. More like someone drifting too far from shore but unable to bring herself back. We didn't talk again until late afternoon, after the chandeliers were installed and the scaffolding dismantled. I was gathering my things, thinking about going home early, something I hadn't done in weeks, when he appeared beside me with 2 coffees. He handed one to me without a word. The warmth of the cup seeped into my hands, steadying me. He asked what my evening plans were. I said I didn't know. He said he had to finalize the stage lighting test and asked if I wanted to stay to see how the chandeliers looked at night. My first instinct was to say no. But my second instinct, the one fueled by loneliness and curiosity and the growing ache of being unseen at home, won. I said yes. I texted Daniel, working late. Don't wait up. His reply came 3 minutes later, okay. That single word made something inside me collapse. The chandeliers were more beautiful in the dark than I could have imagined. Once the last contractor left, the lounge was ours, empty, glowing, transformed. The warm neon over the bar flickered to life, casting gold and red across the dark teal walls. Shadows stretched long across the floor. The chandeliers glittered like constellations suspended in smoke. I stood in the center of the room and turned slowly in a circle. This, I whispered, feels like another world. His footsteps approached behind me, slow and deliberate. That's because you designed it to be, he said. I wanted to tell him that I hadn't designed it alone. That he had shaped this space as much as I had. That the room felt like him now, warm and intense and impossible to ignore. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I asked him if he wanted to test the dimmer sequences. He nodded and walked to the control panel. The lights shifted in waves, brighter, softer, cutting shadows here and there. Each sequence revealed a different mood, a different story. At one point the chandelier lights fell almost completely dark, leaving only the low amber glow of the neon at the bar. The room felt intimate in a way that made my breath catch. He walked back toward me slowly, eyes fixed on mine, and for a heartbeat everything else slipped away. I should go, I said quietly. He nodded once, but he didn't step back. Neither did I. We didn't touch. Not that night. But everything between us changed. When I got home, the apartment was silent. Daniel wasn't there. A half-eaten container of food sat on the counter. A wine glass in the sink. His suit jacket draped over a chair. I stood in the middle of the kitchen with my coat still on, feeling the quiet like a weight pressing in on my ribs. I told myself nothing had happened. That I hadn't cheated. That wanting to be near someone wasn't a sin. But the lies tasted sour in my mouth. When Daniel finally came home an hour later, his tie loosened, his hair mussed, he didn't apologize for being late. He didn't ask about my day. He didn't even look at me fully. He brushed past me with a tired sigh and said he was going to shower. I stood there watching him walk away, and for the first time I realized something devastating. I wasn't sure if he still loved me. I wasn't sure if I loved him. The next week was a slow descent into something I should have stopped but didn't. Daniel and I barely spoke. He left early, came home late, slept facing the wall. Every night the distance between us grew wider, like a shoreline eroding grain by grain. Meanwhile, every day at the hotel, I felt the opposite with Adrian. We didn't flirt. We didn't touch. We didn't cross lines. But the space between us thrummed with unspoken things. He brought me coffee without asking how I took it. I started answering his questions before he finished them. We worked in sync in a way that felt too easy. Too right. Too dangerous. Everyone else seemed to notice something. The contractors teased us lightly, playfully. One of the electricians joked that we worked like a married couple. I laughed too loudly. Adrian didn't laugh at all. One afternoon, while working on the wall textures, he brushed a speck of dust from my cheek without thinking. It was such a small touch. Barely a touch. But my breath stopped. So did his. His hand lingered for half a second too long. Then we both stepped back at the same time, like people waking from a dream they weren't supposed to have. "Sorry," he muttered, voice rough. "It's fine," I lied. We didn't talk for the rest of the afternoon. I went home that day with shaking hands. The breaking point came 2 nights later. Not with him. With Daniel. I arrived home earlier than usual. I hadn't told Adrian I was leaving early. I just needed distance, from the hotel, from the tension, from myself. I wanted to fix my marriage. Or at least try. I told myself that if I put in effort, if I created space for connection, maybe something could be rebuilt. I cooked dinner. Real dinner. Not takeout. Not reheated leftovers. I made pasta with fresh garlic and basil, the kind Daniel used to say he loved. I set the table. I lit candles. I put on soft music. I even changed into a dress instead of my usual tired work clothes. I waited. And waited. And waited. He came home at 10:17 p.m. He didn't look at the table first. He looked at his phone. Then he saw me. He blinked as if confused. "What's this?" he asked. I told him it was dinner. That I missed him. That I wanted us to have a night together. He smiled. But it wasn't warm. It was patronizing. The smile you give a child who made a mess trying to help. "You shouldn't have done all this," he said flatly. I already ate. Already ate. I had stood there for 2 hours waiting for him. And he had eaten somewhere else. With someone else. I felt the truth before I admitted it. So I asked him, quietly but directly. "Who is she?" He froze. Not for long. Just long enough. Then he said I was imagining things. That I was paranoid. That he had been working late, that he had grabbed something with colleagues, that I needed to relax. But people who tell the truth don't over-explain. People who lie do. His explanation was too long. Too smooth. Too rehearsed. He didn't touch me once. Not even when I stepped closer. He just stood there, staring at me, waiting for the moment when I would back down like I always did. I didn't. I walked past him and went into the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. And I whispered, "I'm done. I'm not proud of what I did next. But I'm also not going to lie about it." I left the apartment without saying another word. I walked through the cold night, coat pressed tight around me, tears stinging my eyes. I didn't know where I was going until I got there. I went to the hotel. He was still there. He almost always was. When I walked into the lounge, the chandeliers glowed like golden fireflies. The air smelled faintly of varnish and dust and the promise of something becoming itself. He was alone, sitting on the edge of the stage with a stack of blueprints beside him. He looked up when he heard me. And the moment he saw my face, everything in his expression tightened. He stood immediately. "Claire? What happened?" I opened my mouth. But nothing came out. It was like my voice had collapsed inside me. He stepped closer, slowly, carefully, like I was a bird with broken wings. "Did something happen with Daniel?" he asked gently. Hearing Daniel's name broke me. I shook my head, then nodded, then tried to speak again and failed. He didn't touch me at first. Not until I closed my eyes and let out a sound, not a sob, not a scream, just a small, shattered exhale. Then he put his hand on my arm. Lightly. Softly. Like he was asking permission. I leaned into him without thinking. Just a fraction. Just enough. And that was it. That was the moment the line was crossed. One moment his hand was on my arm. The next, I was in his arms, my face pressed against his chest, his hand cradling the back of my head like I was something breakable. He didn't ask for details. He didn't ask what Daniel had done. He just held me. And I let myself be held. I don't know how long we stood like that. Time softened. The room blurred. The only thing real was the warmth of him and the cold ache inside me finally finding a place to rest. At some point, his hand slid from my back to my cheek. I felt him exhale against my hair. Then he whispered, soft, hesitant, raw. I can't keep pretending I don't feel this. My breath caught. My heart stopped. He pulled back just enough to look at me. His face was open in a way I had never seen. No walls. No restraint. Just truth. Tell me to stop, he said. And I will. I should have. I know that. I should have stepped away, wiped my tears, taken my broken heart home, and tried to glue my life back together with whatever scraps of honesty I had left. But I didn't. I lifted my face. He leaned in. And I met him halfway. Our lips brushed once, just a whisper of contact, a breath, a question. Then again, deeper, surer, hungrier. The kiss wasn't explosive. It wasn't dramatic. It was slow, drenched in years of loneliness, in months of tension, in days of wanting and weeks of denying. It was a confession. It was a surrender. It was the beginning of the end. We didn't sleep together that night. People always assume affairs begin with bodies. Ours began with truths whispered in the dark. We sat on the floor beneath the chandeliers, knees touching, talking in low voices while the city hummed outside. He told me he had been trying to stay away from me. That he had seen the ring. That he had told himself 100 reasons why I wasn't his to want. I told him I didn't know when my marriage had ended, only that it had ended long before this moment. We didn't touch after the kiss. We didn't need to. Everything had already changed. I went home in the early hours, the sky pale with dawn. Daniel's side of the bed was still untouched. He hadn't come home. I lay down fully clothed and stared at the ceiling. I felt guilt. And relief. And fear. And longing. It was the worst combination of emotions I had ever felt. And the most honest. The next day, the world kept moving, as if nothing monumental had happened inside the walls of the Meridian Grand. But everything was different. With Daniel. With Adrian. With myself. The first affair I ever had didn't start with a betrayal. It started with a confession. And I wasn't prepared for the consequences that were coming. Especially the ones I didn't see yet. Especially the ones that had nothing to do with desire, and everything to do with deceit. Because as I would soon learn, Adrian was keeping a secret too. And it was about to tear everything apart. The morning after the kiss felt unreal. Not romantic. Not magical. Just unreal, like the world had shifted 1 inch to the left while I slept. Colors were the same but slightly off, sounds too sharp, air too thin. My own reflection looked unfamiliar, as if I had borrowed someone else's face without permission. Daniel came home at sunrise. I heard the door unlock, the faint rustle of his coat being hung up, the quiet exhale of a man trying not to wake someone he assumed was asleep. I didn't move. I listened as he walked to the bathroom, as he turned on the shower, as hot water hit the tiles. There was a woman's perfume on his shirt. Not faint. Not accidental. Not questionable. Strong. Floral. Sweet. Not mine. I closed my eyes and let the truth settle, he was cheating too. But instead of fury, I felt a strange calm, like two wrongs had neutralized each other in the worst possible way. Like the guilt I felt from the kiss had been diluted by the confirmation of his betrayal. We were both broken. We were both guilty. We were both somewhere else, with someone else. When he came into the bedroom afterward, his hair damp, his expression neutral, he said he had to go in early for a meeting. I said okay. He didn't kiss me goodbye. We didn't look at each other. And that silence, sharp, metallic, cold, cut deeper than any shouted argument could have. I went to the hotel early again. I didn't know if I would see Adrian. I didn't know what I would say if I did. But I needed to be anywhere but the apartment where lies hung in the air like humidity. The lounge was empty, faintly glowing from the lights left on overnight. Dust motes floated lazily in the beams of golden morning light. The chandeliers we had struggled to hang looked like they were suspended in honey. I stepped inside slowly, like walking into a memory. And there he was. Sitting on the edge of the stage. Head in his hands. When he looked up at me, something was wrong. Terribly wrong. His eyes were hollow. Tired. Frantic in a way I had never seen. "Claire," he said, standing quickly, taking 2 steps toward me before stopping himself. I need to talk to you." My stomach tightened. He looked like someone who hadn't slept at all. Before I could ask what was happening, he said the words that dropped the floor out from under me. "I haven't been honest with you." The world hushed. The hum of the lights faded. My pulse slowed to a crawl. "What do you mean?" I managed. "I didn't want this to happen," he said. "I didn't plan it. I swear to God, Claire. But I should have told you from the beginning." The air between us thickened like wet cement. I forced myself to breathe. "Tell me," I whispered. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing, a man rehearsing a confession he never wanted to give. "I didn't come here because of the job," he said. "Not at first." "What?" "I didn't apply for the renovation lead position." My heartbeat faltered. "Then, why are you here?" He swallowed. Hard. A tremble ran through his jaw. "The hotel hired me," he said. "But not for construction." My chest caved inward. "I was hired to investigate." I blinked. What are you talking about?" He hesitated, as if the truth itself burned. "Someone hired me to watch Daniel." My blood turned to ice. Everything stopped. Every sound. Every thought. Every breath. I stared at him, unable to process the words. "Hired you?" I echoed. "To watch my husband?" He nodded slowly. "I'm a licensed investigator," he said. "Under the radar. Hotels occasionally hire outside consultants to look into fraud, sabotage, internal leaks, or personal matters of high-value clients. The Meridian brought me in because they received an anonymous request." "Anonymous?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." "And the request was, what? What exactly were you supposed to do?" His voice dropped to a quiet, devastating whisper. "To find out if Daniel was unfaithful." The room spun. The floor tilted. The neon sign flickered and buzzed like it was laughing at me. "I was supposed to blend in," he continued. "Get close to the staff. Watch who came and went. Learn routines." I was told the lounge was his favorite place in the city. That he'd been seen meeting someone here. That he'd been lying to his wife. My lungs collapsed. I grabbed the edge of a bar stool for balance. "You knew?" I whispered. "All this time, you knew?" "No," he said quickly. "Not at first. I didn't know the woman in question was married. I didn't know it was your husband. Or you. I didn't know anything except that the Meridian wanted an internal investigation without alerting staff." His voice cracked then. "But the moment I saw you, the moment I learned your name, everything changed." My throat tightened painfully. "When?" I whispered. "When did you know who I was?" "That first week," he admitted. "When Evelyn mentioned your husband. When I saw how tense you were when you spoke about him. When I checked the visitor logs and saw Daniel had been here on nights he told you he was working late." My heart cracked. He saw it. I felt the break. It hurt worse than the kiss. Claire, he said, stepping toward me. I swear, I tried to pull away. I tried to keep it professional. I tried to finish the job and disappear. But you. Don't, I whispered sharply. He stopped. His chest rose and fell fast. You can't say this wasn't real for me, he pleaded. I didn't pretend with you. Not once. I didn't plan this. I didn't expect. No, I said, voice shaking. You expected me to be a lead. A subject. A case. That's not. You watched me, I said, the truth burning. You studied me. You noticed everything I did because it was your job. No, he repeated, voice breaking. I noticed you because Don't, I whispered again, tears burning my eyes. He stopped. Everything stopped. Moments like this are slow motion and lightning all at once. It was betrayal layered on betrayal, twisted into something unrecognizable. My husband was cheating. The man I fell for was hired to watch him. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, I had become collateral damage. You could have told me, I managed. Before the kiss. Before everything. You could have told me. His voice was barely audible. I was afraid you'd walk away. You should have been afraid I'd stay, I whispered. Silence. Heavy. Shattering. A storm without sound. I took a step back. He took one forward. Claire, please. Don't, I said again. Just, don't. And then the world delivered its final blow. Footsteps. From the hallway. Fast. Purposeful. Daniel. He walked into the lounge with Evelyn by his side. His eyes went straight to us. He didn't speak. He didn't yell. He didn't look surprised. Instead, he exhaled like a man who had been waiting for this moment. I figured you'd come here, he said. His voice was too calm. Too composed. Too rehearsed. Evelyn stood beside him, tense, arms folded. Her betrayal was a cold one, clinical, premeditated. Daniel walked forward. Stopped 5 feet from us. And then he delivered the final truth. I hired him, he said. The words punched the air out of my lungs. I shook my head. No, I whispered. No. You couldn't have. But he only nodded once. Deliberately. Ice cold. I did. My knees buckled. The world dissolved. You hired him? I repeated. To do what? Watch me. Trap me? No, he said calmly. I hired him to watch myself. I stared at him like he had just spoken another language. What? His jaw tightened. I hired him because I wasn't sure if I was cheating. I blinked. What does that even mean? It means I felt something for someone, he said. But I didn't know if it was real or if it was just loneliness. Or resentment. Or stress. I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust us. So I hired someone to observe. To tell me if I had actually crossed a line. I felt the sickness rise in my throat. Daniel, I whispered. That's insane. I had to know, he said. I had to know if I was the one destroying the marriage. He looked at Adrian. And then he filed his first report. My entire body froze. What did you report? I whispered to Adrian. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Daniel did. He reported that I wasn't cheating. Silence detonated like a bomb. Daniel exhaled slowly. And then he reported something else. I stared at him. Adrian paled. Evelyn looked away. Daniel's voice was quiet but merciless. He reported that you were falling for him. My stomach collapsed. No, I whispered. No. I didn't. You did, Daniel said. No anger. No fire. Just resignation. You were already pulling away from me. Already changing your hours. Already dressing differently. Already laughing differently. His voice cracked then. That's when I knew it was over. My heart splintered. And that's when I started seeing someone else. The blonde perfume. The late nights. It all made sense now. What you saw on me, the perfume, it wasn't lies, he added. But it happened after. I felt like I was drowning in truth. Daniel looked at me with eyes that weren't cruel. Just tired. I didn't cheat on you first, he said softly. You broke first. I broke after. A tear slid down my cheek. Adrian stepped toward me. Daniel held out a hand in warning. Don't. The word echoed through the entire room. Don't touch her, Daniel said to him, voice steady. You were hired to investigate. Not interfere. Adrian's jaw locked. I didn't plan. Daniel cut him off. You kissed her. Adrian flinched. Daniel looked at me then. And you kissed him back. I felt myself shatter. He exhaled long and slow, like he was finally releasing a weight he had been carrying for years. This marriage has been over for a long time, he said. And for the first time I realized he was right. We both had abandoned it long before anyone else entered the picture. He turned to leave. Evelyn followed him. Before walking out, Daniel stopped at the doorway and said without turning around. I hope you find what you were looking for, Claire. Truly. Then he left. The door clicked shut. The silence afterward was suffocating. Adrian stepped closer. But I put my hand up. No, I whispered. Not now. Not today. His face crumpled. Claire. I need space, I said. Time. Air. Something. I looked around the lounge, the chandeliers we hung together, the neon light, the dark teal walls, and felt something twist painfully in my chest. This place was never real, I said. It was a set. A stage. And we all played our parts without realizing someone else wrote the script. He stepped back then. Hands at his sides. Eyes dark with regret. I'm not giving up, he said quietly. Not on you. Not on us. Not on whatever this is. I swallowed hard. I don't know what I want, I whispered. But I know what I don't want. I turned toward the door. I don't want a life built on lies. He closed his eyes. His jaw clenched. And for the first time since I met him, he didn't follow me. I walked out of the hotel. The cold air hit my face like a slap. And I breathed. For the first time in months. I breathed. People like to imagine a story like mine ends with a dramatic decision. Choosing the marriage. Choosing the affair. Choosing the new man. Choosing independence. But the truth? I didn't choose anything. Not yet. I moved out. I stayed with my sister for a while. I cried in bathrooms. I walked by the sea. I slept without dreaming. I woke without direction. I waited for the noise inside me to quiet. And slowly, very slowly, truth began to settle in my bones. I didn't leave my marriage because of another man. And I didn't end things with Adrian because of betrayal. I left because I had abandoned myself long before either man entered the picture. I had been unfaithful to my own needs. My own desires. My own honesty. They were just the mirrors that finally forced me to look. The Meridian Grand opened 3 months later. I didn't attend. But I saw photos. The chandeliers glowed just as we designed. The bar shined. The teal walls gleamed. And the neon saxophone burned warm in the night. I sometimes wonder if Adrian thought of me when he walked through that room. I think he did. I know I did. But I also knew something else. Some love stories are meant to break you open. Not to keep you. And mine? It broke me open. And I needed that. More than I ever wanted to admit.